Okay, so let's talk about Sopranos, Phil. I think a pretty important series in your mind as far as pop music and television goes, and maybe not quite up there with Mad Men for you, but I guess sort of similar, I guess. So anyway, you chose a great one, and I know you had some thoughts on pop music in general, the way it's used throughout The
Yeah, so
Sopranos.
I lost I had my Google. Yeah, I just want to make a couple points because I wrote about when I wrote about the show or the blog, I sounded a little bit equivocal, because I jumped the
I
gun. I
noticed
wrote
that.
about it. Yeah, I was into season three, I think, or maybe even only season two, and I was liking it. I said that, but I think I said something like it's just not even close to Mad Men, maybe as a series, and definitely in the way that it uses music. I think I was wrong on both counts. I now do kind of count it as my second favorite series ever. There's still a gap between it and Mad Men. Um, Sopranos has flaw. It can get Tony can wear on you after a while, certain things, but it is just great with so many memorable moments, so many memorable characters. It just draws you in. I have watched it in its entirety at least, I think, half a dozen times now, and we'll continue to watch it once a year. So I was wrong on the overall show, and I was also wrong on how important music is to it. I do now see that it really is, in its way, it is a blueprint for Mad Men. I think at a certain point, they even get into the pattern of using a song. It takes a while using a song to end each episode. I don't think that really starts till the third or fourth season. It's not always pop music. Um,
Mhm.
or at least it's not pop music in the sense that we've been using the term.
Right.
you know, um, they use, I think, in one episode, there was this big popular Italian song that became kind of Carm's song whenever she had a romantic attachment to someone. They use that to end an episode. They'll use an old Italian song or piece of classical music, but they do use a lot of pop music to end episodes. And when I wrote about it into season two or three, I think I said, well, I think I singled out two great moments. And by the time I finished the seven seasons, and certainly by the time I'd watched it three or four times, I could name a dozen great moments, like legitimately great moments now. So, you know, I wrote about it too soon, and the blog entry, which is the entry that ends up in the book, really didn't capture how great I think it is. Now I rewrote the Clipography one
Right.
separately because the song they ended up picking came much later and wasn't included in the blog entry. And I mean, we haven't even mentioned the ending, which is not even one of the top 10 moments for me,
Yeah.
musically wise.
Mhm.
As a moment in the series, probably yes, but it's got the most famous pop music ending of any series ever. It even eclipses Mad Men in that
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been
regard.
much discussed for sure.
Yes. Oh yeah. So the four songs that I thought we'd talk about tonight, the one that I wrote about in the blog entry, and actually I could quickly add that I forgot about, I'll quickly mention the other one. I wrote about two songs early on, and then three that come up later that I've come to think of as the three highlights of the show. So in season one, you get, I think, two great moments. The first one, I copied down how far into it. The first one is season one, episode 7. And it's the most obvious thing in the world to use, maybe not for a series set in New Jersey about gangsters, but they use the Jefferson Airplane's White Rabbit.
Right.
And, that sounds right up front. I'm sure that sounds very unexciting to anyone who's heard White Rabbit used, in a dozen movies and 2 dozen TV specials. But they use that in a really interesting way. I think that episode, there's been some tension between Tony and Tony Jr., his son, who's very young in season one. I think he's still 12 or 13. I think he got into trouble at school. And, by the end of the show, Tony Jr. is just one of the weirdest, most neurotic, most unforgettable and annoying, and times you feel sympathetic towards some characters in any TV show ever. I mean, on the message board, when people talk about The Sopranos, they talk about Tony Jr. as much as anybody else. It's just so weird by the end.
Yeah.
But he's still kind of a normal kid. at the beginning, in the first season. And Tony, as a gesture, I think, to ease the tension, makeup, it starts in the kitchen. White Rabbit starts up right away, and Tony's fixing them ice cream sundaes. And the song, I shouldn't say it came out of nowhere. It was used earlier in the same episode. It was the first flashback we got to Tony as a kid and his remembrances of his father. And his father, some of the mysterious things his father did, related to crime. And White Rabbit was used along with a number of other 60s songs. So it was kind of a reprise of that. But now it's playing, they're in the kitchen, Tony's making sundaes. And, these are really decadent sundaes. He's got whipped cream. He's piling on the ice cream. Tony's obviously overweight. His son, even at that age, looks like someone who's probably going to have a bit of a weight issue. So it's kind of, in a way, it's really irresponsible and indulgent what Tony's doing. And they're even squirting whipped cream directly into their mouths as White Rabbit plays. And it just works.
Yeah.
That's what's great about, it's one of those moments where I can't tell you why it works. I can't tell you why White Rabbit, which I don't want to see used in a film with the soldiers marching off to Vietnam or hippies riding in the street. I don't need that. But to see it in this context, it's great. It really is.
No, I agree.
It's almost like, and I think I maybe said that this is the drug of choice for these two guys, There was this great line in the TV series, Roseanne, where Roseanne and Jackie were sniping at each other, and Roseanne was getting on Jackie about being single, and Jackie said something like, why don't you scarf down another donut, Roseanne, or something like that. Like that was her crutch, and Tony's crutch often through The Sopranos is food. So that was the first moment I really loved. And then the second one, I said season 1. I think it actually comes in season 2. And it's where they try to whack Tony. I'm trying to think where it comes from. I think it's Junior Soprano. That's the ongoing thing where Junior Soprano explicitly and Tony's mom implicitly try to arrange to have him killed. And he survives, and then the episode ends with him on the phone with Lorraine Bracco, his psychiatrist, and she says, "Other than that, how are you feeling?" He says, "Great. No, I'm going to feel even better when I find out who tried to whack me." And then Cream's "I Feel Free" starts up, and that is just great too, because the camera pulls back, and you have this shot of Tony just standing there in his backyard as "I Feel Free" plays. And then it goes into the credits, just like White Rabbit. We talked about that last time, kind of splitting the song,
right,
with what's happening and carrying it onto the end credits, so you can think about it and really like you don't want the song cut off, so you get to hear more of the song and you get a chance to think about it. So those were the first 2 great uses of music. And then the last 3, this is where it just goes to a whole nother level. And I sent you season 3, episode 5, where they use R.L. Burnside's Shuck Dub, it's called. And R.L. Burnside, Kershaw doesn't think much of him. I think he gives him a couple of B- or something. He's got a real following. I have a feeling he's a guy who maybe something like Pitchfork would have made a big deal about. He started in the late 60s. But then seemed to get a second career in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And he's a blues guy. I've got 3 of his CDs. I think Rollin' and Tumblin' is on every one of them. There's one great song from his early stuff called Going Down South, which is so weird. Like it's one of those songs you would think, this is blues, but this is blues cross with, again, we've talked about other songs in this context, cross with Public Image or cross with Schooly-Doo something. It is so sinister.
Yeah.
Shuck Dub is from one of his 2000 albums, CDs. And the way it's used, I forget all the details of the episode, but the main connecting with the song, Charles Dutton, who's one of the great African-American actors, great actors, period. I'm sure you've seen him in other things. I don't know if he ever showed up on The Wire. I think he might have.
Okay.
I could be wrong. He definitely shows up in either Boys in the Hood or Menace to Society. And he's a director too. He's such a great actor. He plays a cop in The Sopranos, and he stops Tony, gives him a ticket. And Tony just sort of laughs it off. He goes, look, I know Tony knows the councilman, played by Peter Riegert. He says, talk to Councilman such and such, and he'll take care of this. And Charles Dutton, he's just a working cop. He doesn't care. He gives him the ticket. And Tony takes it, laughs, calls up the councilman, and not only does Riegert get, that's the actor's name, not only does he get the ticket overturned, he gets this cop, Charles Dutton's character, reassigned off the street, gives a desk job or something, like, or working in the worst possible, working down in the library, something like, which he just hates. Tony finds out, and he says, "Wow, geez, you didn't have to go that far," but he doesn't make him change it, and I think he's told it's too late to change it. And the next time he encounters him, he finds out that Charles Dutton, probably because the demotion cost him some salary, is now working in what turns out to, I read this book on the Sopranos, and it turns out to be a famous landmark in St. Jersey. They sell like marble little icons or statuettes for patios. And it's a real store, and it's well known. So Charles Dutton now has a job there. Tony finds out, and then later in the show, the last scene, he returns. He's made a big order. I can't remember if he actually apologizes to Charles Dutton's character at one time. He does it. He probably does it in a Tony way. Look, I didn't mean for you to get demoted. I don't think he actually uses the words, I'm sorry. And then he's ordering something expensive, and he says, look, just make sure it gets to my place in one piece. And he goes to give him a rather sizable tip. You see the denominations. I think it's like $400, not above and beyond whatever this costs. And Charles Dutton, it is such a great moment. Charles Dutton just looks at him contemptuously, doesn't want the money. Looks at him contemptuously, says something, it'll be on its way, and walks away. And it's one of those few times in the entire run of The Sopranos where somebody eloquently and perfectly takes the moral high ground over Tony. And Tony's left looking. You just hate Tony at that moment.
Wow.
Such admiration for Charles Dutton's character. And then the song starts up. And Tony looks just befuddled, like, he can't process that this man has dignity and won't take the money. And he's just standing there. He doesn't get it. And the R.L. Burnside song starts up, which is such a bizarre, sinister song. It's like just this weird kind of reverb, echoey thing with some words that are almost speaking in tongues,
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a moving scene and layers on this sinister song, which changes the meaning of the scene. And again, you're just thinking about it. Goes on in the credits, and okay, I thought it was that, but why are they using this song?
Yeah.
And it is so memorable. I mean, I don't know where they came up with that. That's also the best kind of scene. How did they come up with that?
Yeah, it is just such a weird sounding song, for sure.
It is. The next one, and I'm really moving into my favorite stuff here. The next one is, sorry, Scott. Okay. The next one is If I Were a Carpenter. Same season, 4 episodes later, If I Were a Carpenter. And I wasn't able to send this to you. It's not, if you type in Sopranos, If I Were a Carpenter, you get this joke that Christopher says in an earlier episode. Some guys come over to his car and he starts singing If I Were a Carpenter and You Were a Douchebag. And that's what comes up if you search it on YouTube. It's a point in the series where Carm and Tony, their marriage has just hit rock bottom. I don't know if you remember, he moves out of the house.
Right.
They're ready to launch divorce proceedings, but he's also being really difficult about it. Like, he's angry about her. He's angry at her because he can't understand. Tony's understanding of situations is very limited. I buy you all these things. I give you this mansion. What else do you want? He thinks he can go around, just have affairs and disappear and do whatever he wants. As long as I give you this stuff, you should be happy. And she's such a great actress and so great in that series. I think this is some of her finest episodes, is that stretch where Tony's moved out. Anyway, in the scene, it's the last scene in that episode. She's just come back to the house. I can't remember all the other stuff, but she comes in the driveway, enters the house. The first thing she sees, she looks out, and there's Tony. Even though he's moved out of the house, he often comes back to use the pool. So he's in the pool, lying on his inflatable cushion there, and he's there. She can't do anything about it. He's also, by this point, I think he's gone around, spoken to every good lawyer in town, which prevents her from hiring any of them because they now have a conflict of interest. So he's
Right.
even closed off that. She's at her most despairing moment. So she looks at him, sighs, walks into the kitchen, phone rings, picks it up, and it's Meadow. And after a long, difficult night, that I remember, because Finn is afraid. He knows that the one character is gay. Of course, the name slipped my mind at the moment. And that's a great subplot. And he wants them to leave because he's worried that, he's gonna get killed. And they go back and forth, and he kind of gives in. But then he asks Meadow to marry him, and she says yes. So that's what the call's about. Meadow says, "Mom, I'm getting married," and you get a little bit of her, but you get a lot of close up of Carm, and and you keep seeing her looking out at Tony in the pool, and you're trying to figure out all the emotions that they're going through. She's just obviously, it's almost like she's really happy for Meadow, but she's thinking of the wreck of her own marriage at the same time. And she's just trapped and she feels helpless. And then out of nowhere, If I Were a Carpenter starts up. I think it's the Bobby Darin version.
Okay.
Yeah, I meant to check that, but I'm pretty sure it's the Bobby Darin version. And it fits so well. It just captures how sad that scene is. A scene of elation, but one of great sadness for Carm. And Meadow has no idea what's going on. She does know her mom's crying, but she thinks her mom's crying purely out of joy.
Right.
She's partly crying out of joy, and she's partly crying out of just reaching the depths of misery in her own marriage. And I think Father Phil is in that episode.
Right.
Father Phil's another ongoing. She just hates all. She has such bad luck with men throughout The Sopranos. She gets involved with David Strathern, the teacher at AJ's school, and she has her first actual affair with him. And that turns out bad, and she almost has an affair with, of course, I call him Fabio. It's not Fabio, it's Furio.
Oh, yeah.
And that ends up terrible. Furio just vacates, and she has what turns out to be a bad experience with the ex-husband. He's got some relationship to her brother-in-law, the painter. Anyway, she's just treated horribly by men throughout. And that song gets at it somehow. Wow. It's just great. It's just great. And then the one that I picked for the book, and again, finding out how particular they were about the music. I read that book, Sopranos. I wrote down the title. It's called The Sopranos Sessions.
I think I have that actually.
You wouldn't read it unless it's good to read
while you're watching it,
or in conjunction with a rewatch. I don't think you'd enjoy it much just picking it up. So they have a whole chapter on that about the music, and David Chase, that's his name, Scott.
Right.
Last name. David Chase talks about how particular he was in choosing songs. And I made a note, they even apply the breaking the waves rule because evidently Chicken Town, which is a song I'm about to talk about, he had heard that years before, and he said, I'm going to use that at some point. So the song preceded the episode. He just wanted to get it in there.
Wow.
Somehow. And this is a song, I'd never heard it until I heard it in The Sopranos. And I think I'm not alone in this. I think I have come across other stuff that says, yeah, this is the highlight of the whole 7 seasons musically. It's late. It's season 6, episode 14, which might even be, I think that's really technically season 7. Season 6 got split in 2 parts.
Oh,
so I think that's probably the last 7, within the last 7 episodes. It could be like 3 from the finish or something.
Right.
And it's Phil Leotardo, Frank Vincent's character, who becomes so important in the last season. He has this weird relationship with Tony. They're sort of work together sometimes, but he's He also hates Tony because of Steve Buscemi, Tony's cousin, Anthony Blondetti, Tony Jr., who killed Phil's cousin, I think his cousin. And he cannot get past that. So the season starts with Phil talking to Butchie, one of his right-hand guys. They're sitting at a bar. And Phil's looking up at the wall and he's seeing pictures of people that are now dead. Johnny Sack, his cousin, Carmine. And he starts to talk about when his family came over to America and went through Ellis Island. And the first thing they did was they got renamed. He gives the real name of his family. It's a long Italian name. And the guy, just like in The Godfather, remember Michael comes over. Vito comes over and he can't speak any English and they call him Corleone.
Right,
Says, what
right.
village do you come from?
Yeah.
Or the guy says, he's from Corleone. Okay, Corleone, that's your
Corleone,
name. Yeah. So they changed Phil's real family name to Leotardo. And he says, that's where it started, Butchie, the men in John, what is the word for, I think it's Italians that are more non-Italian than Italian. Italians that come from, and maybe it's just non-Italians, white people who aren't Italians.
Okay.
But they use the word constantly as friends, men and John or whatever. He says, that's where it started, the disrespect, all this misery that our family's gone through. And then I think the song starts up, Evidently Chicken Town by John Cooper-Clarke, all I know John Cooper-Clarke, Peter used to mention him when he first got me interested in punk. I didn't know anything about him. Maybe there was a song in a compilation. He was a poet, I think, first and foremost, but he did record music. And Evidently Chicken Town starts up, and Frank Vincent, that ends with him just saying, no more, Butchie, no more. And the song is like Shuck Dub. It is so strange.
Yeah.
It's not punk. It's like spoken word poetry, sort of.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a song I'd like outside of. I think it's so striking. I probably would like it. And then you cut to the church where Christopher is getting married to, I forget the actress's name. Where Scotch.
Yeah, she's
and Stranger Things.
Carla Bono.
Yeah, Carla Bono, who first time I watched The Sopranos, I didn't pick up on the fact that she was, what's her character's name in Mad Men?
Faye.
Faye, of all the women, we'll talk about it later, but there's no one Dawn treats worse than Faye.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, Christopher's getting married. The song's still playing. You immediately think of The Godfather when they're getting married. And Tony and Christopher embrace, but there's a lot of tension going on with them at that point. And Christopher, you can see Christopher when he pulls back from the embrace, they each look at each other, and Christopher looks really apprehensive, like he knows that his time is short almost.
Yeah, yeah.
And Tony looks at him in a funny way too.
It's a hug of death.
It really is. Yeah. And I think, and then the camera pulls back, if I'm correct, and you just get the whole wedding party and long shot. Can't remember there must be other people in the church. And I think it's just the highlight of the show. The famous ending with Journey and Don't Stop Believin'. It's great and the song works, but again, it's still Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. That can't go to another level for me because of the song. Yeah. There's a limit to how much I like that song, and it doesn't transform the song. I'm not saying they should have used a different song. It works. But Evidently Chicken Town is the highlight for me. Shuck Dub is probably second. And the Bobby Darin, I think, might be third for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to rewatching it for sure. I mean, I've only seen it once, the series, and those are all great scenes. John Cooper-Clarke, yeah, what a weird, inspired choice. I remember him. I think I was working at the college radio station around the time he was putting out stuff, and in London. And the only song I remember, and I think this was kind of sort of hit. I think CFNY might have played it. Is Down on Beasley Street? Does that one ring a bell to you?
No, not at all.
It was like punk poetry, and just like and we should say if he just looks like he stepped out of Blonde on Blonde, and I think he looked like that even 30 years later, right? Like he's someone.
I saw him in a documentary recently.
Oh, really?
I don't know. It could have been. I'm wondering. Not the polystyrene. I don't think it was that. But I've seen a few. You know what? It was probably. It could have been the one White Riot, the one about politics and
Okay.
um,
Yeah, I mean, like, and
rock
I think
against racism.
he was kind of even made fun, but I think he probably, he probably took it in good humor. But I mean, I think he was kind of mocked because he just looked
Mm.
like a Dylan retread. But yeah, like, so I think I looked up the song. I think it's 1980, right? The
Oh, okay.
evidently Chicken Town. So it's pretty. I think he only started. I think it's probably on his first or second record, and yeah, just like you have to wonder someone like that. Like,
Was he
I'm
not
sure he
paired up?
appreciated getting that paycheck from The Sopranos because I doubt he made a lot of money on his own music. So
I was just going to say, I hope he got a lot of money for it. I don't know if that would be a one-time payment or if,
yeah, I
every
don't
time it
know.
airs or every DVD that's sold, he gets like 5 cents or
You'd
something.
have to think there'd be a pretty good royalty deal for something like that. And
They're well into the show by that point. So I think, if it had been first season, I'm thinking you might not have got much by that point. I'm sure it was something to get a song in something of a financial boon to get a song in. Was he not
one,
paired with a guy named John Otway?
I don't know if they're together, but I know John Otway a little bit as well, and he's kind of in that same quirky.
Okay.
There was a few people in the UK around that time who sort of, it's almost like they came in the door through punk, but they probably would have been there anyway, and they're just these really quirky sort of poets. I think John Otway was more like a really kind of wild singer songwriter type, but a really like kind of noisy, sort of off key one or something is what I sort of
Yeah.
remember him as. So like a kind of wild singer songwriter, but he just sort of went through punk or whatever. So
I'm just going to mention very quickly, Scott. One other thing I loved right in the final episode, even more than Journey, was the use of Bob Dylan's "It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding," which
oh yeah, I don't
Tony
remember.
Jr. has taken up with a new girlfriend who was in the same sort of hospital observation center as him. I don't think the relationship's turned sexual yet. She's got a lot of issues. Anyway, they're out in the car that Tony bought for Anthony Jr. and they're out of the car, and that song's and "It's All Right, Ma's" playing and used diegetically. It's playing on
Right.
the tape deck, and Tony says something. It's sort of probably unintentionally funny, something. Wow, you're right. This guy's great. And then the car goes on. The car goes up in flames because
Wow.
Tony, something he had done. He left the keys in the ignition. It was the wrong type of car to do that. And they just
Okay.
watch, and the Dylan song keeps playing. And I think you hear the DVD get ruined in the Dylan. You know how
Oh
they do
wow.
that? Like when a record
Yeah.
stops playing, the voice gets really weird and everything.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that's a great moment too. Now I'm wondering, those two episodes are close together. How much was John Cooper-Clarke paid, and how much was Dylan paid for the use of
Yeah.
"It's All Right, Ma"? I have to believe Dylan got a huge check, and
Yeah. Yeah.
John Cooper-Clarke got a good one. But
Interesting.
that's one of those uses of Dylan where I almost felt like Anthony Jr. Yeah, wow, this is amazing. Oh, I know Anthony Jr. Remember, this is during the heyday of Iraq and Afghanistan and
Right.
post 9/11. Anthony Jr. says it still says so much about today, or something like that. That's
That's
another
great.
one. Great use.
That's great.
Okay, so that was good, Scott. We actually
Okay, well, thanks
got
for that.
a
Yeah.
decent amount.
Yeah, no, I'm looking
Um,
forward to rewatching The Sopranos at some point. I'm still in the middle of
do you
beyond
know
the
where
middle
you
of
are?
Mad Men. In Mad Men, yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
just started season 6 actually, so
Okay,
I
good.
think I'm
So
like 2 episodes into it or something. So
good. When you finish that, we'll get on that right away while your memory is fresh. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
And we can definitely do 40 minutes on that. I'll pick out a couple of shorter ones for next time. Okay.
yeah. No, that sounds good. Okay,
Okay. Great, Scott.
sounds good, Phil. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a
We'll
lot. Take
talk
care.
soon. Okay,
Bye.
have a good one. Bye bye.